Welcome back to the Daily Better. I'm so glad you're here. You know, we spend a lot of time on this show talking about how to optimize our lives, how to grow, and how to build better habits. But today, I want to talk about the one thing that can destroy all of that progress in a heartbeat: the tendency to look sideways. At some point, almost everyone reaches the same quiet frustration. You're doing the work. You're showing up. You're trying to move forward. And yet, it feels like you're falling behind. Not because you stopped, but because you looked sideways. I remember sitting in my car at 11 p.m. a few years ago. The glow of my phone was the only light in the driveway. I was scrolling through LinkedIn, and I saw a post from a former classmate. He had just raised Series A funding for his tech startup. He was smiling, holding a glass of champagne, surrounded by his team. At that moment, my own bank account was in the red. My project was stalling. My car made a weird clicking sound when I turned the key. I felt a physical sickness in my stomach, a mix of shame and inadequacy. I felt like a ghost in my own life. I wasn't just broke. I was spiritually bankrupt. I had let his wins steal my peace. That's when I realized the fundamental trap of the modern age the moment you start measuring your progress against someone else's timeline. Something subtle begins to break. Your effort feels smaller. Your wins feel unimpressive. Your pace starts to feel wrong. You are trying to win a marathon while looking at a sprinter in the next lane, oblivious to the fact that you aren't even heading to the same finish line. We live in an era of aggregated excellence. Every time you open your phone, you are hit with the peak performance of 1,000 different people. You see one person's shredded physique, another's financial breakthrough, and another's perfect relationship. Your brain, which evolved in small tribes of 50 people, isn't designed to handle this. It aggregates all those separate successes into one ideal human and asks why you aren't all of those things at once. You are comparing your messy behind-the-scenes footage to everyone else's highlight reel. And then you wonder why you feel like a failure. But here is the psychological liberation. The spotlight effect. We walk through life convinced that there is a giant spotlight on us, that the world is staring at our failures and judging our slow pace. In reality, everyone is too busy worrying about what you think of them. Everyone is a protagonist in their own tragedy, and merely a background extra in yours. They aren't watching your race. They are panting and struggling in their own. The fundamental error of modern life is that we compare results without comparing conditions. We treat life like a standardized test where everyone gets the same questions and the same amount of time. But life is a custom-built obstacle course. A 40-year-old entrepreneur with 3 kids isn't playing the same game as a single 27-year-old with unlimited energy. To compare their bank accounts or their speed of growth is not just unfair. It is mathematically illiterate. It ignores the variables. One is optimizing for stability, the other for sheer velocity. Both are winning their respective games. But if they swap scorecards, they both feel like they're losing. We have become obsessed with speed. But we forget a basic law of physics. Velocity is how fast you're going. Vector is where you're headed. Most people are moving at 100 miles per hour toward a cliff they never intended to climb. Running fast in the wrong direction is significantly worse than standing still. If you are standing still, you can at least look at a map. When you compare your invisible phase to someone else's breakout phase, you are ignoring how progress actually works. Think of an ice cube in a room that is minus 10 degrees Celsius. You heat the room to minus 5 degrees Celsius. then -2 degrees, then -1 degree. Nothing happens. The ice remains a solid frozen block. To an outside observer, your effort looks like a failure. But then, you hit 1 degree Celsius. Suddenly, the ice melts. The breakthrough at 1 degree wasn't magic. It was the result of all the work done when things looked stagnant. You aren't failing. You are just at -2 degrees. Consider the skill gap. A painter with 20 years of practice shouldn't be the benchmark for someone in their second year. The gap you see isn't a reflection of worth. It's a reflection of time spent being bad. It's years of quiet repetition and mistakes no one saw. When you compare your raw, messy beginning to their polished, finished version, you erase the entire process that made their excellence possible. You are on chapter 2 while they are on chapter 20. You cannot skip the chapters. And looking at the end of their book won't make your pages turn any faster. Comparison doesn't adjust for the invisible backpack. Someone caring for aging parents or battling a chronic illness isn't moving through life with the same freedom as someone whose time belongs entirely to themselves. They are running with a backpack full of stones, yet they look at the unburdened runner ahead of them and feel inadequate. Comparison asks, why aren't you further along while ignoring the storm you've been walking through? The damage of comparison isn't just emotional, it's directional. The moment you start chasing someone else's pace, you abandon your own. You start making decisions that don't fit your soul. You optimize for speed instead of sustainability. You trade depth for urgency. You buy things you don't need to impress people who aren't even looking. And slowly, you begin to resent the very path you're on, not because the path is wrong, but because it doesn't look impressive enough from the outside. This is why people burn out. They weren't exhausted by the work. They were exhausted by the mental gymnastics of trying to justify why they weren't there yet. Running your own race means understanding that progress only makes sense when it's measured against your own reality, your time, your energy, your responsibilities. True progress is often quiet and boring. It rarely creates moments worth posting about. It looks like showing up for a workout when you're tired, or choosing to be patient with your children when you'd rather snap. These are the micro wins that never trend. But they compound. If you improve by just 1% every day, you are 37 times better by the end of the year. But for the first 6 months, you won't see a thing. If you are comparing your invisible compounding phase to someone else's visible breakout phase, you will quit right before the curve starts to turn upward. The ultimate flex in 2026 isn't a Ferrari or 1 million followers. It's a quiet mind. It's the ability to see someone else win and feel genuine joy for them, because you know their win doesn't make your path any less valid. Success is a private experience. When you keep the comparison internal, the question stops being, am I ahead of them, and becomes, am I a little better today than I was yesterday? That question is the only one you can actually answer with honesty. It respects the fact that life isn't evenly distributed. It acknowledges that some people start with a head start, sometimes due to generational wealth, while others start with a deficit. For context, in the United States, the median net worth for white households is approximately $285,000, while for black households, it is about $44,900. These are not excuses. They are variables. None of that makes you behind. It just makes you human. At this point, a voice in the back of your head is likely pushing back. It's the voice of the high achiever, or perhaps the fearful critic. It says, This sounds nice. But isn't it just an excuse for mediocrity if I stop comparing myself to the best? Won't I just become lazy? Let's put that inner critic on the witness stand and have an honest conversation. The critic asks if I don't look at the leaders in my field to see how far I'm falling short. What will drive me to work hard? The answer is simple but profound. There is a massive difference between inspiration and comparison. Inspiration is looking at a master and saying, I didn't know a human could do that. Now that I know it's possible, I want to see how far I can go. Comparison is looking at that same master and saying, because I can't do that yet. What I am doing right now is worthless. Inspiration pulls you forward. Comparison pushes you down. One adds energy to your system. The other leaks it. You don't need the shame of being behind to fuel your work. In fact, shame is a high-octane but dirty fuel. It burns hot, but it destroys the engine. The most sustainable drive comes from the desire to master the craft, not the desire to beat a person who isn't even looking at you. The critic then asks, but isn't some level of competition healthy? Doesn't the social hierarchy exist for a reason? Yes, competition can clarify your goals. But you have to ask, what is the cost of entry if the price of your competitive edge is the constant feeling that your life is a failure? You are paying too much. In the wild, animals compare themselves for survival. But you are not a gazelle on the savannah. You are a conscious being capable of defining your own metrics of survival. If you win the social hierarchy, but lose your ability to sleep at night or enjoy a quiet afternoon with your family, you haven't won. You've just traded your soul for a higher rank in a game that never ends. The critic persists. What if I'm actually just slow? What if my own race is just a way to hide the fact that I'm not talented enough? This is the most painful doubt of all. But here is the truth. Talent is a starting point, but endurance is the finish line. There are thousands of talented people who burned out at Chapter 5 because they couldn't handle the fact that they weren't at Chapter 20 yet. They were sprinters in a world that requires long-distance hikers. If you are slow, but you are still moving, you are already outperforming the talented people who quit. Speed is often a byproduct of privilege, better gear, fewer burdens, more help. But resilience is built in the mud. The person who takes 5 years to achieve what another does in 1 year often has a much deeper understanding of the terrain. They are made of iron. The critic's final move. Fine, but the world is moving fast. If I don't keep up, I'll be forgotten. I'll be irrelevant. This is the fear of 2026, the fear of being outdated. But look at the things we truly value. We don't value the fastest book. We value the deepest one. We don't value the quickest friendship. We value the most enduring one. Relevance is a moving target. If you chase it, you will be exhausted forever. But authenticity is a fixed point. When you run your own race, you become a fixed point in a spinning world. Ironically, that is when people start looking to you. They stop looking at the sprinters and start looking at the person who seems to have a piece they can't understand. When you play your own game, the frantic energy of needing to catch up evaporates. You stop rushing. You stop forcing outcomes that aren't ready to bloom. You begin to build momentum that fits the actual shape of your life. Over time, you stop feeling behind not because you suddenly move faster, but because you stop using the wrong finish line. You realize the person you were trying to beat was running toward a different city, for different reasons, with a different heart. The only finish line that exists is the one you set for yourself. If you reach someone else's finish line, you'll find it's empty. There's no trophy there for you because it wasn't your race. So if you're feeling discouraged right now, stop. Take a breath. Look away from the screen. Look away from the them and the they. Ask yourself, am I getting a little better today? Are you a little more consistent than you were last month? A little more patient with your own learning curve? A little more honest about what you can actually sustain without breaking? Because that's the only race that matters. It's the only one that leads to a life of depth instead of just a life of speed. And the best part, it's the only one you are guaranteed to win. As long as you don't stop running, your timeline is not a failure. It is a story. And stories are only ruined when the author tries to write someone else's ending. Stick to your script. Run your race. The finish line is waiting. And it's exactly where it needs to be.